levels. What can I do as a trader? What is the safest type of a trade that I can take?
You can sell options.
Write puts. Perfect. Alright, you can write puts, or in other terms, you can short puts. It's up to you if you want to short ATM puts or OTM puts. Only a very risk seeker might short ITM puts. Secondly, do you all observe one more thing over here? क्या हो रहा है? When the markets were around over here, where was the RSI?
At support.
At support. You can see how precisely the market or the RSI is taking support from there, and market also took support from the gap order, and from there markets reversed. So there are multiple ways of you taking an entry. Multiple types of orders can be placed. I was just saying the safest entry was, in terms of derivatives, the safest was writing puts. The next type of an entry, or the little more riskier entry, could be buying futures. And thirdly, the most riskiest would be buying calls. Fair enough? Yes or no? समझ आ रहा है अभी तक?
Yes.
What sort of a gap is this?
Runaway
gap.
Wonderful. It's a runaway gap, moderately strong. Chances of filling are there. Let's look at the criteria. Wide range candle, yes. But are we getting a closing near the high?
No.
What has happened? Market came down, tested once, went back up again, formed that small lower high, and filled the gap. Point clear? So this is the difference between your runaway and your breakaway gap. Now let's come to the third type. It is known as a common gap. Now I say that this is by far one of the most useless gaps, because these gaps, in 95% of the cases, actually even a little more than that, we'll just take a conservative estimate, in 95% of the cases, these gaps fill regardless. So how do these gaps look like? These gaps are formed in a range bound market or a consolidating market. Market is in a range, there will be a gap, market came down, it will fill the gap. Again, a gap, market came up, came down, it will fill the gap. Will always and always fill the gap. Whatever. In at least 95% of the cases. And in a common gap, we do not look at the criteria also, because these are by far the weakest gaps. As I said, this usually fills. So let me show you an example. Nifty. Recently, our markets were consolidating for a while within a range, right? So this was a range. Now what is happening? There was a gap, market filled. There was a gap, market filled. There was a gap, market filled. All these gaps have been filled. So these all types of gaps are known as your common gaps. Is this point clear? Now what sort of a gap is this? Again, this is not your runaway, this is your breakaway gap. Resistance turns support. So यहाँ पे confuse मत हो जाना. So despite this level being tested once, it has not thoroughly filled. थोड़ा सा space अभी भी बाकी है.
And the gap between before two candles, it's a breakdown gap, right?
Yeah, it's breakaway कहते हैं. Same.
Yeah, breakaway gap.
Himalaya, on the last one, एकदम end पे, that would also be a breakaway gap, right? This one?
This would rather be a runaway gap.
And why is that?
Because over here the support level was over here, not over here. This is rather
Okay.
a breakdown, retest, and then the market is continued. अच्छा, now
Got it.
one very logical thing I'm asking. Now tell me, will this gap fill? अभी यहाँ पे तो criteria fulfill हो नहीं रहे, ठीक है? But tell me one very logical thing. If a market is creating a breakaway gap in a down market or a runaway gap in a down market, so will the gap fill eventually?
No.
Yes. Why? Eventually it will fill. Why? Because the economy is always on the growing side. ये लॉजिक समझो. तो अगर डाउन साइड पे गैप्स बन रहे हैं, यूजुअली इवेंचुअली इट विल फिल. बट हाँ, व्हाट वी नीड टू डिस्टिंग्विश इज कि इफ इट्स अ ब्रेक अवे गैप थोड़ा सा ज्यादा टाइम लगेगा, इफ इट्स अ रन अवे गैप फेयरली थोड़ा सा जल्दी हो जाएगा. एज सिंपल एज दैट. कॉमन गैप है तो देन एंड देयर क्लियर आउट हो जाता है. पॉइंट क्लियर टू ऑल?
Yes, one query, Mane. Is this applicable for stock as well?
Yes, it's applicable throughout. I showed you examples on Infosys and TCS. Now the last type of gap is known as an island reversal. Again, it is considered as one of the very strong gaps by nature. How does this look like? There will be a trending market. There will be a gap up. Markets might consolidate for a few days, or there will be only one day. And now again, the market will give a gap down. So what happens over here is market leaves an entire space blank, or there's an entire space on the chart which is blank. So now what will happen is during this gap down, the market will trend extensively. मतलब ये जब gap down होगा, provided your criteria are fulfilled. So ये gap down criteria number 1, wide range candle, and secondly, we should get a closing near the lows. So if these two criteria are fulfilling, then what will happen? You can create aggressive shorts over here, and the markets will start plunging. Similarly, in an existing downtrend, let's say there is an existing downtrend, market will open a gap down, market might consolidate, and then market will open a gap up. So what is happening now is the chart, or on the chart you observe a complete blank area. So if the gap up candle criteria is fulfilled, first if it's a wide range candle, and second if the closing is near the highs, then you will see a very good trending market. अब इसका एक एग्जाम्पल था on Tata Motors very long back on a 15-minute chart. तो वो अभी ट्रेडिंग व्यू पे दिखेगा नहीं. So I'll rather just show you what had happened over there back then. And I'll tell you one
Take example of Nifty also. Nifty in February 2021. So very good example.
Let me just cover this example. So I'll tell you one thing. What happened over here was that time many of the traders got trapped, thinking that it's a island reversal. What happened? Tata Motors, existing uptrend, market was like this, gap up, gap down, and over here it fulfilled the criteria also. It fulfilled the criteria, wide range candle closing near the lows. However, people created aggressive shorts, but what we observed was that the market immediately filled the gap and rather continued its rally on the upside. मैंने मना किया था मत क्रिएट करो यहाँ पे शॉर्ट्स. There was a logical reasoning behind this. I have drawn the picture in front of you. Can someone tell me what went wrong over here? I've just made a very small change between the previous example and over here.
The market was consolidating in the first phase.
Wonderful.
So rather, it would be considered a breakaway gap.
Wonderful. Not a breakaway. You can consider it as an island reversal. But the problem is, what was the problem just before the break? Just before that gap over here, the market started consolidating. There was a range over here. So tell me one thing. If now the markets are giving you a gap down, doesn't the market have a cliff to hold on to? यहाँ पे एक level है to hold on to clearly, and that is what the market did. Though it fulfilled those criteria, but what happened was market held on to that cliff, and the market rallied on the upside. So in an island reversal, you need to be careful कि यहाँ पे trending market होना चाहिए. So now once there is a gap down, market does not have any level to hold on to. Are you all understanding this difference? Difference समझ आ रहा है? क्योंकि consolidation था, तो वहाँ पे एक level मिल रहा था hold करने के लिए. अब यहाँ पे ट्रेंडिंग मार्केट में कोई लेवल नहीं है टू होल्ड ऑन टू. इट कैन स्विफ्टली फॉल. That is the only difference.
You can find this type of gap in 2021 during the Delta variant correction.
COVID में.
Yeah, February में 2021 February वो टॉप पे दिख रहा है ना, एक डोजी कैंडल बनी फिर गैप डाउन खोला.
This one.
बट इस केस में वो कंटिन्यू नहीं हुआ, वो रैली समझ नहीं आई नीचे शॉर्ट में.
Again, there's a major level over here. यहाँ पे देखो, major level हो गया. Market has something, see plus minus few points, it's okay. But what you need to understand is market has something to hold on to. And immediately below that also there was a gap.
But can this be considered island reversal?
एक तरीके से आप बोल सकते हो उसको island reversal. Not a problem. And over here what you need to understand is, one, so we saw that there's a level, major level over here. Okay, plus minus a few points. Secondly, what sort of a gap is this now?
A runaway gap.
Runaway gap. Speaking of the criterias,
Strong candle and market never touched this level again after breaking away. I mean after going up.
criterias pehle wide range candle, yes. Are we getting a movement near the highs? Yes. What has happened? Gap becomes a little stronger, came down, tested this level once, did not break. Came down, tested this level twice, did not break. Third time में जाके इसने break करके fill किया. So are you all getting the difference? It did fill the gap. Eventually it did fill the gap. But it took 2 times before it filled the gap. Previous example में क्या था? Because it was a weak criteria, that is why it immediately filled. इसमें थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा time लगा. Point clear? See, this one more than a island reversal, I would rather suggest to consider this as a common gap. Common gap. ठीक है, एक बड़े से range में है वहाँ. To treat this as a common gap, not an island reversal.
Okay.
How can you differentiate common gaps with both of the two teachers?
Sorry?
How can we differentiate these common gaps?
As I said, common gap is within a consolidating market. Like this. यहाँ पे तो था नहीं कुछ. यहाँ पे जो भी gap up gap downs हुआ वो immediately उसी दिन पे fill हो गए थे. So wherever there's a consolidating market, there you see gaps usually being filled.
Can we consider in Reddington a breakaway gap?
Where?
Back, little bit back. Not this side, left hand side.
This one is a breakaway gap.
Yeah, I was about to say you this one.
There is a strong breakaway gap followed by a runaway gap again, which is giving you strong fulfilling criteria. Did not fill, has not filled as yet. Okay? So these are all types of gaps. Only 2 more points I want to cover over here. One, अब यहाँ पे हमने देख लिया runaway gap है, markets are in a downtrend. Of course, there is a major support level over here. Let's say if the support breaks. Now, once markets come up to this level, अब बताओ how will the markets easily fill the gap or will it take some time to fill the gap?
It will take some time.
It will take some time. See, try to understand one thing. If the market has created a gap, okay, no matter what sort of gap, if the market has created a gap and after that it has extensively rallied or extensively moved away from the gap, and now for some reason if it's coming back down again towards that gap, so now markets won't easily fill the gap. Now markets will take a lot of time if it wants to fill the gap. Point clear? अब वो क्लोज बाय था, यहाँ पे जाके फिर आता, टेस्ट करके ब्रेक कर देता. But now it's already extensively moved away. Already we are how many percentages or how many points up? 90%, almost double from that gap, breakaway gap. We almost double on the upside from that breakaway gap. So now if the markets are coming on the downside, so it will become even more difficult for the markets to fill the gap. And the second point that I wanted to cover is, let's say that on the day time frame. Now hear me out carefully. On the day time frame, you observe a breakaway gap. Sorry, on the day time frame, you observe a common gap. But on a 5-minute chart, you observe a common gap. I said it the other way around now. On a day time frame, you observe a common gap, and on the 5-minute time frame, you observe a breakaway gap. So which needs to be given more priority? Which gap needs to be given more priority if, let's say, you are an intraday trader, you want to create an intraday position? क्या करोगे?
Common gap.
आप एक इंट्राडे ट्रेडर हो, आपने डे चार्ट पे ऑब्जर्व किया ये तो कॉमन गैप है, इट्स विद इन अ वेरी बिग रेंज, बट इन द मॉर्निंग आवर्स यू ऑब्जर्व दैट on the 5-minute chart, it's rather acting as a breakaway gap. Now this is an example I have seen long back. मेरे को याद नहीं कब देखा था. I have seen this and I observed a very interesting point over here. As an intraday trader, what will you do? Let's break the trading session into two parts, first half and second half. I'm giving you hints. We are assuming that the breakaway के criteria and all are fulfilling. Okay, I'm assuming breakaway के criteria are fulfilling, making the gap even more stronger.
So in the first half, we will trade the breakaway gap, and in the second half, we will look for the common gap to be filled.
No. In fact, what you will do is in the first half you will not trade. First half में आप trading लोगे, especially on the short side, because what the market will do is it will multiple time test the level to break that gap, to break that level. So what will the market do in the first half? It will consolidate within a range. तो आपको लगेगा यहाँ से शायद consolidate करके ऊपर जाएगा. But on the other hand, we need not forget that the bigger time frame is more important, and it is a common gap on the bigger time frame. Eventually, this gap will fill. So what will happen in the first half? Usually, it will consolidate multiple times. It will test to weaken this level, and finally, what will happen? It will break, and once that break happens, you can then create your shorts of whatever kind you want, and then the gap will be filled. Point clear है ये सबको? Are you all understanding what I'm covering over here? This is something that I personally had observed on Nifty 5-minute chart. I don't remember when this had happened. It was way long back. Is this point clear to all? Yes or no? See, what I'm trying to say is, if on the 5-minute chart you observe a breakaway gap and you are an intraday trader, so what you will do is firstly always form a view on the day chart, and you know that on the day chart it's a common gap. Matlab, you know that there is a very highly likely possibility that the gap will be filled. Okay, let's say this is a common gap on the day chart. But on the intraday chart, this turns out to be a breakaway gap, with the criteria fulfilling everything. The first candle of the day is fulfilling all the criteria. Last में ऐसे closing होगी, something like this. Now what the market will do in the first half is, it will test this level multiple times. It will weaken this level. So usually in the first half, in such scenarios, we do not take a trade. Short भी नहीं करते क्योंकि time decay हो जाता है उतने time पे. As soon as it breaks, then we can go short. Point clear? Alternatively, of course, you can go for call shots. That is totally up to you. ये level के ऊपर के call shots आप कर सकते. Now is this point clear to all? होगा 22nd April में. All right.
By 21st September 2021, can you open Nifty?
So देख साक्षी ने भी 22nd April recent example दिया. Let's see what is happening over there.
21st September 21.
Wait, we'll just look at this 22nd April वाला example.
फ्रीजर में दूध याद करके पी लिए, ठीक है?
ठीक है
Common gap तो है, but
ठीक है
not exactly a breakaway over here. Not exactly a breakaway gap over here. This is a common gap only. Okay. So try to understand one thing. अब एक और चीज समझ लो in terms of gap. Let's say there's an existing downtrend. Market opens with a gap up. What sort of a gap is this? अब ये मैं बोलना कि ये सीखा ही नहीं. This is a very normal gap. This is also your common gap only. This is not your runaway gap. This is not your breakaway gap. This is your common gap. So this is again your common gap only. Probably something like this. Okay, so you can consider this as a small breakaway gap. Market was consolidating. Market opened with a gap down. After that, it consolidated. It did not fill that gap. First half में इसने consolidate किया. Actually, overall day में इसने consolidate किया. It did not actually breach. RSI was taking the resistance over here. RSI did not give a breakout. You were over here. You can see if you were using RSI, you are saved. In fact, यहाँ पे market gave a false breakout. RSI was still intact. It did not give a breakout. ये एक advantage होती है. Alright, so this is more or less about the gaps. Let's not spend too much time behind it. As I said, it's more of a topic from a reference point of view. If you know something कि A type का gap है, then you can accordingly plan your trades. Now let's come to the more important topic, Fibonacci. Now let me tell you